Look at this huge book that I've got in my hands. I know you're thinking to yourself right now, wow, Biggie Bobo, that's a huge book you've got there. Impressive. You must be really smart to read a book that huge, which you would be correct for thinking this. Don't even try to read this book yourself, okay? This book is way too smart for you. If you're thinking this book is too smart for me, then this must be your first video of mine. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Biggie Bobo. My hobbies include peeling onions like a honey badger because I didn't know you had to cut it in half first. This impressively large book is called Black Science. It was published by Image Comics, which is a publisher that only smart people read. It was written by Rick Remender and illustrated by Matteo Scalera. It's a series that started in 2013 until it finished after 43 issues in 2019. You might remember the name Rick Remender when I was talking about Deadly Class, as he was the writer for that series too. I didn't anticipate making a video on this series when I started reading, but only a few issues in, and I knew I wanted to talk about it. The only problem is that when I finished it, I had a hard time gathering my thoughts on it. I was pretty unsure about how I felt about the ending and how it related to the overarching themes of the series. Hopefully I'll figure that out by the time I finish writing the script, otherwise it might take me several months to make this video. So Black Science is a pretty sizable and also pretty complex series. It's about this guy named Grant McKay. He's a scientist that invents a device with the ability to travel between parallel dimensions called a pillar. Every decision that everyone makes creates a new dimension, and all these parallel dimensions are stacked on top of each other like layers to an onion. This collection of oniony dimension layers is called the Eververse. Listen, I'm not going to say that's the worst name Rick could have given it. He could have called it the Basherverse. At its core, Black Science is about a man learning to let go of petty rebellion and enjoy the flawed life he was given instead of searching endlessly for a perfect one. At least that's what my biggest takeaway was. The story is about this conflict between Grant McKay and his employer Kadir, a conflict that becomes an archetype that is repeated throughout all of space and time. Every Grant McKay of every universe is destined to squabble with every Kadir in every universe. The story starts smack dab in the middle of Grant's first journey across the Eververse. On his team are Nate, Pia, Jen, Ward, Sean, Rebecca, Kadir, and Chandra. Wow, that's a lot of characters. Jen and Ward die pretty quickly, so that's going to make it easier for me. With so many characters, it might get kind of hard to keep track of who all these people are, so you're going to have to pay really close attention to this part. Sean is in college, but left college to help Grant create the pillar. Rebecca also helped create the pillar and is also Grant's mistress. Pia and Nate are Grant's kids. Don't confuse Pia and Rebecca, even though they look very similar to each other. Kadir is Grant's boss and the one overseeing the whole project or something like that. Chandra is like Kadir's assistant or something. Basically, she's the only one that doesn't hate Kadir. At some point in their first jump, the pillar is broken, so it activates at random intervals and goes to random locations. The first several issues are just having to deal with the treacherous and life-threatening dangers that await them, and having to just survive long enough for the pillar to activate again so they can leave, usually seconds before dying or getting stranded. The first thing that shakes up the story is when Nate and Pia are kidnapped by this random guy who turns out to be an older, grittier Grant. He's trying to get Nate and Pia home to his wife, Sarah. There's another name you need to remember. He's talking all this nonsense about how no Grant McKay and all the universes are able to protect his kids and that this is the only way for them to make it out of this journey alive. Like, pfft. What do you know, dude? Grant's gonna clutch up and make it back home with his kids unscathed all by himself. Oh wait, he just died. He got crushed by a giant pillar this huge monkey man was building, killed by the very technology that he thought would save humanity, but ended up ruining his family life. Tragic and ironic. Grant's dying wish to Kadir is to make sure his kids get home safely. Even though these two have been at each other's throats this whole time, and long before the story even started, Kadir promises that he'll do all that he can for them. This is also the universe where Chandra gets infected by an alien ghost, so now she's got nefarious and mysterious motivations that nobody's aware of. After Grant dies, they're transported to a new world. This time it's like medieval dinosaur land, and the gang's about to be executed by the medieval dinosaur king, when Kadir comes in with his signature fish armor to rescue them. This is also where we meet the shaman. He's like a sci-fi Native American magical medicine man they sort of kidnapped in the first dimension they were in. So their little chase to escape the dinosaur guys ends with Nate and Pia getting separated from the rest of the crew. So now they think Nate and Pia are dead right after Kadir just promised their father that he would keep them safe. But they're not actually dead. They survived falling off this giant cliff, so now they're trying to make it back to the pillar before it jumps again when we're introduced to the drones. The drones are a cult of dimension-hopping psychic millipede monsters hell-bent on killing everything because life is suffering and all that jazz. They can read your thoughts and are trying to get their hands on a pillar so they can spread their genocide across the whole Eververse. Nate and Pia get captured by them, but eventually escape and are able to meet up with everybody else. Okay, so far it's been pretty standard stuff, right? But this is the part that gets kind of complicated. So the old and gritty Grant and Sarah from earlier catch up to them while they're hiding from the drones. Kadir and the shaman are fighting their entire army while the rest are in a secret cave underground waiting for the pillar to jump again. This alternate Grant and Sarah got there with a small handheld pillar. That means there are currently 2 pillars right now. They start fighting and alternate universe Grant is accidentally killed by falling on a sharp rock. While all of this is happening, Kadir and the shaman are still fighting the drones, but their army is too numerous, so they eventually get caught and use their telepathy to find out where the rest of the crew is. So now the drones know where to get the pillar they need to leave this universe and conquer another, but just when all hope is lost, Grant McKay shows up out of nowhere to save the day. So is this like a third version of Grant that we're being introduced to? No, this is the same Grant that got crushed by the giant pillar in the previous dimension. Apparently the monkey guy that was working on the pillar that crushed Grant saved his life so that he could repair the pillar, but he actually just pretended to work on the pillar and instead worked on the portable handheld pillar he got from another alternate version of Grant and Sarah, and spent weeks traveling through the Eververse in search of his kids. And then there's this whole thing on the Egypt planet, and yeah, you get the idea. So now the original Grant McKay is here, but it's still not enough to beat the drones. They take his handheld pillar and they leave, continuing their mass murdering across the Eververse. So that's probably pretty bad, but at least everyone is okay. Alright, remember when Chandra got possessed by a weird alien ghost thing? Well, she wasn't able to hide it any longer, and she grabs the handheld pillar that the old Grant and Sarah brought and leaves to an undisclosed dimension. Alright, anyway, the pillar is jumping and our heroes end up in probably the worst dimension yet. Basically, they're in a dimension where this dimension's version of Grant and Rebecca and Kadir and all of them created a pillar and unintentionally brought back to this dimension an extremely deadly virus that our main characters contract shortly after exploring a little bit. At the same time, there's this regime that's hunting them down, confusing them for this dimension's version of them. So their plan is to get back to the shaman because he can heal the virus with like his magic. You know? The shaman is very vehemently against using this technology at all, since so far all it's accomplished is people dying, giving alien death cults better access to superior technology, and releasing extremely dangerous contagions on unsuspecting communities, and whatever Space Ghost possessed Chandra is gonna do. At this point, they could just leave and forget about this place and all the damage they unintentionally did to it, but Grant is talked into doing more than just coasting by. He decides he's gonna undo the harm they've caused and release a cure for the virus into the air using the shaman's magic technology thing, even though there's an entire army immediately outside their hiding spot that's trying to kill them. So while Grant is trying not to get lasered, the shaman is still going on about how the pillar is evil and that we can't let it jump again. Things escalate to the point where Rebecca is forced to kill the shaman so that he doesn't destroy the pillar and leave them stranded. So the shaman is dead, and Sean notices that the pillar's next jump has the wrong coordinates set in. Turns out, Rebecca was planning on jumping everyone not to their dimension of origin, but instead a dimension where Rebecca's brother is alive. Yeah, we learned earlier that she was responsible for her brother's death when they were kids, and the whole reason she's been assisting in the research and development for the pillar was so that she could travel to a dimension where her brother was still alive. Yeah, I know, but this is what's happening. She smashed Sean's head with some kind of metal object, so now he's not doing so well. She pulls a gun on the rest of them, adamant about jumping to the wrong dimension. Kadir is able to stop her though, and he puts a sword to her neck, but just when everything seems under control, Grant comes in having finished his task. He starts fighting Kadir when he sees him seemingly about to kill Rebecca after killing Sean and the shaman, not knowing that Rebecca is the bad guy in this situation. Grant stabs Kadir, leaving Rebecca to go and plug the wrong coordinates into the pillar. The pillar jumps and we're left with the people of this dimension realizing that the virus is cured and that our main characters were actually the good guys the whole time. But then, evil space ghost possessed Chandra shows up out of nowhere and unleashes a bunch more evil space ghosts. But don't worry guys, this isn't going to be important later. After the jump, we learn that something went wrong and that everyone was flung into different dimensions. We follow Grant 3 years after he landed in a strange alien world, having forgotten most of his memories.
In Breath of the Wild, Link can't remember who he is because does he get it? Oh.
He relies on a computer system to jog his memory as he tries to find a way to traverse dimensions and find the rest of his crew. This part of the story features a lot of character growth for Grant that takes the form of abstract cosmic nightmare flashbacks. I don't really feel like explaining everything that happens, so I'll just say that it ends with him coming to terms with his childhood trauma and lifetime of mistakes that followed. With a method to travel between dimensions and a newfound determination to find his family, he uses this spaceship's ability to track the suits that everyone was wearing. He doesn't know who each suit belongs to, so he's just gonna have to hope that he can find his kids before it's too late. The first one he goes to is actually a dimension we're already familiar with. It's a planet that's torn to pieces by war between World War I era Germans and futuristic magic Native Americans. And yes, it makes as much sense as how I just described it. Except now the drones are here too. Turns out the suit that Grant was tracking belonged to Ward. Remember when I mentioned Ward one time 8 minutes ago? Well, this is where he died, so that means this wasn't the right dimension. And now he's gotta keep looking. The next universe he goes to is actually the first normal-looking universe he's been to. He tracks to a spot in the middle of the woods only to discover that the suit belongs to another corpse. This time it's Rebecca's though, except it's not the Rebecca that he knew. Remember how Rebecca was trying to go to a universe where her brother wasn't dead? Well, this is that universe. Rebecca killed a version of herself and had been living a stolen life for the past several years. You know Grant wasn't gonna let that slide. I'm pretty sure the only thing he had to do to completely ruin Rebecca's life was to report the body to the police, because after that, her brother knew she was an imposter and then she got arrested. Sorry, Rebecca, but you kinda had it coming. After that whole debacle, Grant goes to the next universe in hopes of finding his family. This time, Grant is taken to a planet called Tirana, where a huge important gathering is taking place. This gathering is the union of the three Forevamids, forming the Omnimid, which is some kind of magical object that promises peace among the three factioning clans that suffered through war and conflict for eons. But unfortunately, Grant's giant spaceship crashes into the Omnimid, shattering the Forevamids, which is obviously very bad. But the good news is that Pia is the princess of Tirana, so Grant finally found her daughter, but accidentally sent the entire world spiraling into war and maybe even rumors of war. This part of the story is really fun, even though all this fantasy stuff is very tongue-in-cheek and kinda goofy. I don't really feel like explaining everything that happens, but at the end, Grant trades his intelligence to a witch named Doxta in exchange for another magical item that'll do the same thing as the Omnimid or something. So Pia and Grant, without his intellect, leave, but Grant decides to take Pia home before getting Nate. Pia goes up to her home to see her mother for the first time in years, but Kadir is the one who opens the door. Yeah, the same Kadir that Grant stabbed right before getting jumped. He somehow landed in the right universe, even though the likelihood of that happening is literally 1 in infinity. Grant is on his way back to his spaceship to go jump to another dimension to find his son, but Mr. Block shows up to stop him. Mr. Block was the guy funding the whole project. We've heard his name and seen variants of him from other dimensions, but this is the first time we've seen this version of Grant's employer. You're gonna quickly find out that this guy is quite possibly the most evil person in the entire multiverse. He holds Grant hostage so that he can make more pillars for him, but since he lost his intellect to a witch, he doesn't know how anymore, so they just throw him in an insane asylum because Mr. Block told everyone he kidnapped Pia and killed Nate. So now everyone thinks Grant McKay is a serial killer, while Kadir gets to take credit for all his work and marry his wife. And Pia is forced to go along with this story, even though she and Kadir both know it's not true. So now that Block Industries has an operational pillar, the world is very quickly introduced to highly advanced technology brought over from different dimensions. Pia is trying to live a normal life while she's constantly reminded that her dad's work is being stolen while he rots in a cell. Meanwhile, Block is being very negligent with bringing dangerous stuff from other dimensions, and even has this weird Epsteinian dungeon where he invites other variants of himself to create this interdimensional monopoly. Pia eventually is alerted of something jumping from another dimension with this device that Grant gave her before being taken away. She learns that the jump landed in Hong Kong, so she goes there hoping that it's her brother Nate, but as she gets closer and closer to the location, she finds out that it's Chandra and the army of alien ghost-possessed people from that one planet. Alright, that's my bad. This part did end up being important. So she runs away when she's found out, and she's being chased all throughout Hong Kong, and then she's cornered and all hope is lost. Okay, now is the part of the story where Black Science becomes a superhero comic. So Nate and Sean, who did not die, are a part of an interdimensional superhero task force dedicated to thwarting the alien ghost people. And because the alien ghost people are here now, they came to this dimension and saved Pia by crushing this guy that was chasing her with a giant hammer. This is Black Science after all. Look at that eyeball. Okay, so pretty much the entirety of Hong Kong gets possessed with the alien ghosts, which are apparently called Zerites? Zerites? I don't know. I'm just going to call them alien ghosts because I think it's funny. This superhero team that Nate and Sean are a part of now is called the Legion of Ethical Champions, which might be the worst name for a superhero team since the Armorines. The Legion of Ethical Champions works to create a way to unpossess everyone in the Eververse from the alien ghosts. This eventually leads to the witch from the planet Pia was the princess in to come back. Remember that? Doxta. This little battle with her leads to Pia absorbing Grant's intellect and becoming really smart like he used to be. Meanwhile, the state of Hong Kong gets pinned on Block Industries, and Kadir pushes the blame onto Grant, of course, which also means that he admitted to stealing all of his work. So good job on damage control, Kadir.
I had nothing to do with the helium that was stored.
Grant is busted out of the loony bin while trying to escape the alien ghosts. Okay, you know what? I'm tired of calling them that. The Zerites are trying to get a hold of Grant so that he can make more pillars because they don't know that he isn't smart anymore. I don't know why they can't just reverse engineer the pillar they already have, but whatever. That's not even the worst part because the drones have showed up now. Yeah, so that's 2 races of interdimensional conquerors here to kill the vibe. Plus, the giant vulgar monster from earlier escapes too, so that's not good either. He does kill Mr. Block, which was pretty cool. So all hell is breaking loose in Otsego, Wisconsin right now. You've got an army of alien body snatchers, a death cult of telepathic bug people, and a swarm of bloodthirsty fuzzy minions who are on their way to rend your nipples.
Look at my fucking nipple!
It was a tough battle, but in the end, they finished their machine thing that just destroys all the Zerites. Now they just have to deal with the drones and the children of Harlog, the Defiler. But Kadir is in the lab creating an interdimensional wind sail as an attempt to move the entire universe to a place where nothing can jump to or from their home dimension, cutting them off from any more attacks from any more interdimensional threats. It's also revealed that this isn't even Kadir and Chandra's home dimension. They've apparently been dimension hopping for some time, trying to do something. I think Kadir was looking to schmoove in on Sarah, while Chandra was actually trying to find a dimension where this technology was perfected, I think. I honestly don't really know what the point was of making Kadir and Chandra dimension hopping people. But either way, Kadir is going to move their universe outside of the Eververse with this big machine. Grant and Sarah are here to stop them, but they fail to do that while everyone else is struggling to defend themselves against the drones. Eventually, Pia pulls up with an army of Tehranan warriors, and they're going hard, right? But then, for the 4th time today, a world-ending threat appears out of nowhere. It's Doxta the witch that took Grant's intelligence, and she's hot now.
She's hot.
But that doesn't even matter because Kadir's interdimensional wind sail just moved the whole universe into the Neververse right before Grant and Sarah escaped with Chandra's pillar. Guys, this is getting too crazy. Okay, the next couple of issues are dedicated to Grant and Sarah learning to rekindle their love despite everything that's happened, and deciding to continue looking for their kids even though it might wipe out all of existence. The only way these two are gonna find where Kadir sent their home dimension is by traveling to the center of the Onion, the original dimension where all of the dimensions branched off from. It's got these snake angel people who are apparently spending their time living as avatars of other people in other dimensions. So that means that every single person in every single dimension is being piloted by a snake angel. Not too far off from that one episode of Rick and Morty, which aired way before this issue. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really like this development. I'm not sure what it really adds to the themes of this series. I mean, the existence of infinite versions of yourself is enough to drive home the idea that your life doesn't really matter. But it turns out that you also don't even really exist and are only an avatar being controlled by some dope at the center of the multiverse. This whole part is very abstract and confusing, which I guess it's not even close to the first time this series has been like that, so whatever. It turns out that this trip to the center of the Onion led to the destruction of all dimensions in the entire Eververse. And then the Legion of Ethical Champions teleports them back to their home dimension, so everything is okay. While Grant and Sarah were gone, Kadir had successfully flung their dimension into the Neververse. And I guess because of what Grant and Sarah did on the Snake Angel place, this is literally the only dimension in the entire multiverse They aren't creating other dimensions through their choices, they can't jump anywhere else, so they're stuck in an apocalyptic wasteland consumed by Doxta's evil magic. Kadir and Chandra had been in charge, but they start arguing with everyone else and eventually decided to throw a mutiny and exile Kadir and Chandra to fend for themselves in the remains of their world. Grant and everyone else devises a plan to stop Doxta and free their world from her rule. They gave it their best shot, but was tragically not enough. Now at the mercy of this evil witch, Kadir and Chandra show up all gangsta-like. After this, we're suddenly dropped into an entirely new environment. Grant and Sarah are perfectly fine, living in a perfectly normal home, if not a little bit technologically advanced. We suddenly find ourselves observing Grant's morning routine that's grown very dull and repetitive for him. They now live in a world with an oppressive status quo and suffocating regulation. Sugar, caffeine, calories, alcohol. Every decision made is influenced by a bubbly AI voice telling them what they can and can't eat or drink or think or say. Grant goes to work to meet his colleagues long since dead on his previous journey through the Eververse. He's taken to see his boss, Kadir, who's like the king of the world or something. We learn that in Kadir's confrontation against Doxta, he was able to trick her into recreating the entire universe, exactly as Kadir desired. We don't know how or what exactly happened, but he made it so everyone who had died came back to life, but had no memories of what happened. All except for Grant. Grant was given the memories of everything that's happened and clearly hates this life of such restrictive control, and when faced with the one who pulls all the strings in his life, he snags a laser gun and points it at Kadir. In this moment, two alternate realities are created. One where Grant puts the gun down and reluctantly continues his heavily controlled but ultimately comfortable life. The other, he shoots and chooses to take on the entire world in order to relive his past life of constant rejection of authority. We cut back to each universe with drastically different outcomes. In one, Grant lives his life, spends quality time with his family, celebrates his birthday, learns to be grateful for Kadir and all that he's done for the world. In the other, he takes countless lives in order to escape the police, disrupts the lives of his family in the process, and in the end gets Nate and Pia killed. The other Grant McKay may be living under what most would consider a fascist regime, but at least his family is safe and happy. The other Grant is jaded and damaged, and with his wife Sarah are now going to resume their never-ending hunt for their children across the multiverse. And if you've been paying attention, this version of Grant and Sarah looks strikingly similar to the first time we saw a different version of Grant and Sarah, all the way back in the beginning of the series. I'm honestly not really sure what this callback is getting at. Are you telling me that these two Grants are literally the same person? Because according to what they said initially, Grant and Pia were killed by the pillar exploding, not in a car accident. Not to mention that this takes place way later chronologically. There's no time travel in this series from what we've seen, so I don't know if this way of circling back to earlier in the series was actually thought through. But either way, that's where the series ends. Let me just say that I think this series is really good, start to finish. It was definitely easier to comprehend reading through it a second time for this video. It has such a huge focus on our characters and their endless list of flaws. The whole jumping through dimensions and getting to know crazy worlds made for such a creative and constantly evolving structure to this character study. I mean, you've hopefully been paying attention this whole time. You've seen how insane things get. It starts sci-fi, then it's horror, then it's fantasy, then it's superhero, then it's post-apocalypse, then it's dystopian. It's not that long of a series, but the fact that it does so many different things, and even when it's pretty tongue-in-cheek about it, it still feels genuine and thought out. The attention to detail is amazing. There's so much setup and payoff. The way it loops back to the beginning is really cool, even if it feels like it wasn't planned from the beginning. One thing that kind of bugs me about Rick Remender is that he loves internal monologues that explain what a character is feeling. It works in small doses, but a lot of the time there'll be action happening at the same time as a character, either Grant or Kadir, is talking about their problems and how they feel about them. I honestly found a lot more enjoyment reading when I just completely ignore these and focus on what's actually happening on the pages. And this is not unique to Black Science. I can't say these monologues are really that necessary to understanding these characters most of the time. We get plenty of flashbacks and abstract nightmare sequences to have a good grasp of these characters. I think Rick is afraid of his comics being labeled as mindless and shallow if the action sequences didn't have some kind of narrator eloquently describing their internal struggles.
I find I'm so excited I can barely sit still or hold a thought in my head. I think it's the excitement only a free man can feel. A free man at the start of a long journey whose conclusion is uncertain.
Besides that, I really think the writing is very clever and unpredictable. Matteo Scalera's art is fantastic. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this series. The environments range from mundane suburbia to crazy, high-tech, high fantasy stuff. But he consistently gives each setting a distinct feeling. The entire way through, Matteo brings so much creativity to the designs of the monsters and aliens, as well as the normal-looking people. Grant McKay is so recognizable with his huge, pointy nose.
Like when you go to the beach and someone yells, "Shark, shark," and then they just realize that it's
Grant McKay
doing the backstroke.
And even though it's always confused me why he made Pia, Sarah, and Rebecca so similar looking, I still think the art is excellent beginning to end. I'm giving Black Science a 4-star rating, and I highly recommend it. But that honestly wasn't the main reason why I wanted to make a video about Black Science. From the start, I knew I would really enjoy it, but the ending is really what I wanted to talk about the most. If I could, I would just scrap literally everything I've said so far just so I could talk about this finale. Because I think it's the most interesting finale to a comic series I've ever read. But I needed to go over the whole story so that you wouldn't be confused if you haven't read it. So here we go. This is where the preamble ends and the video actually starts. Roll the intro. Okay, so this has to be the most unhappy, happy ending of all time, right? Grant is living in what most people would describe as a fascist dystopia. Like, this has got to fall under at least one of the 8 or 9 fascisms. He has no control over his job, or his diet, or even who gets to come to his birthday party. Nate wants to create a series of novels based on the crazy stories that Grant swears are true, and they have to be approved by the Board of Entertainment Commission in order for them to be distributed. You can't just go out and publish them yourself, even if you wanted to. That's how controlled everything is in this society. If I lived on this world, I wouldn't be able to make this YouTube video without first getting it approved by a committee. Ain't no committee gonna approve this video. Have you seen it? Do I need to play the intro again? Yet Grant's entire character development throughout this series is in his final decision to let go of his rebellion. He decides that his comfortable life and loving family and stable job is worth the sacrifice of his own need to be free. Free to have an unhealthy diet, free to make edgy jokes, free to shoot whoever tells him what to do. The way Grant gets to live happily ever after is to just accept that. This is not how most comics or even stories in general would end. It's actually Grant's alternate version of himself that rebels against the establishment that feels more in line with how the story would have ended. Nobody wants to read a story about how a man learns to be grateful for all that the overpowering government has given you. But it works somehow. It makes sense for this character and his arc. He spent the entire series hating anyone or anything that tells him what to do. This world, created by a man he's held exclusively contempt towards this entire series, has full control over his life. The Grant at the beginning of the series would have shot himself before accepting that. Maybe he realizes that among the countless worlds he could be living in, this one is probably the best outcome. This ending makes Kadir the hero of the entire story pretty much. Grant is responsible for all of his friends and family getting killed since it was him that decided to steal the oxen heart from Doxta in the first place, even after Pia repeatedly begged him not to. But on the other hand, Kadir is the reason this technology had a chance to be developed in the first place. So who's responsible for what really doesn't matter. Grant and Kadir are both stubborn and prideful. Both of them have done really bad things but still possess selfless intentions, yet accuse each other of being self-absorbed and narcissistic. Both have moments where they act heroically and others where they act cowardly. Even though a lot of the time in this series Kadir is portrayed as the bad guy, he really isn't any worse or better of a person than Grant is. If the story took place from the perspective of Kadir, Grant would definitely seem like the bad guy a lot of the time too. He's brash, he's irresponsible, he's a bad father, he has a petulant view of authority, he's always making things worse. But we still root for him because we understand how much baggage he has. Kadir is given a lot of the same treatment though. We understand his values, his goals, his motivations, but I think Grant is still the more likable character just on the simple fact that he's like more chill and that he doesn't have an obnoxious sidekick. So is this series advocating for a world where everyone is robotically compliant to an AI voice that tells them what they can and can't do or say? No, obviously not. Grant's opinion on how this world functions is how we, the audience, are supposed to feel about it too. Grant is only like this because he remembers how the world used to be. Theoretically, if everyone is cool with living in a fascist society, then is there really anything wrong with it? It's not that Kadir has created a system that micromanages everyone's someone's lives out of malice or a hunger for power. This is genuinely what he believes to be the best solution for the problems that come with free society. And he's kinda right. You may be given a limited amount of alcohol you're allowed to consume, but that also means that Kadir has successfully eliminated alcoholism from society. I'm sure there are tons of other problems that this very unappealing system solves, but at the end of the day, are any of us willing to sacrifice our freedom for that? Grant McKay was, despite being the first person to say no to that question at one point. There's a lot you could say about how this ending portrays what it does, but I don't think the point of this series is to do that. It was to show that even after disastrous mistakes and a lifetime of failure, maybe all we have to do is cherish what little control that we have. We might not be able to choose what world we live in, or who our bosses are, or if our lame neighbors get to come to our birthday parties, but we can control how we treat those who matter most in our lives. Subscribe or die.
This information occupies free open space inside your skull.